2, 1. That was Leah, if your girl only knew. So Antonio Brown, I guess a couple of days ago, was talking about how racism doesn't exist. And he premised that on the fact that he got a $100 million contract. It's weird that Colin Kaepernick also got a $100 million contract, but he clearly sees racism. It's also weird that Oprah is worth billions of dollars and she sees racism. It's also weird that the NFL has committed to over $250 million over 10 years to eradicate racism. So I think that what is interesting is that Antonio Brown premises the idea on the fact that he was able to be successful, $100 million worth. But that's based on physicality. And even if you do not buy the premise that racism does exist, we do know that one time when they could freely own human beings, they prized the big, strong black dudes. They prized them, and they were often separated from the others and told how special they were. Contrast that with Antonio Brown, one of the most gifted receivers of the last 20 years, a Hall of Fame talent, precise run runner. Very few people have exhibited or have the kind of talent he does. And at a very early age, particularly when you exhibit that level of talent, you are told, much like those people that the people could own human beings did before, you're told you're special, you're glorified, you're exalted, you're fed, you're a champion, you're a hero. Tom Brady is not coming to let you live with him because you don't possess a special talent. And it's fairly common with, I would venture to say, if he's in his 30s, he probably exhibited a lot of those physical traits in his early teens, probably 10, 12 years old. And for 20-some years, he's been treated differently and well. That will start to wane as his abilities start to wane. His favor will start to wane as his athletic prowess does. But look at, he's lived more privileged longer than he hasn't. You see this, it's fairly common. You look at Herschel Walker, you look at O.J. Simpson, you look at people who have at a very early age told that they were different, and then that is the prism they view things from. It's interesting. And even if you're an entertainer or you're a comedian, a singer, a rapper or something, you're not as, nobody gets rich that fast like athletes. 20 years old, you're already set for life, right? And so it can skew your life. But to say that racism doesn't exist on what happened to you, that just because you, like, that's just like me saying that because I ate, there's no such thing as hunger. Or because I am well, there's no such thing as sickness. You can't predicate everything on you and decide that you make these. Why are there whole institutions trying to eradicate it? Tell that to banking, there's no racism. Tell that to housing, there's no racism. Tell that to the judicial system, there's no racism. The FBI came out with 3 reports every 7 years that says that a police department are rife with nationalism, white supremacy, and guess what? Racism. Black men in America live at the same rate or own the same amount of the nation's wealth as they did in 1970. That's not racism. Your houses are appraised differently based on who lived there. That's not racism. So yes, I understand that your view on race could be skewed based on your circumstances, on your individual outlook. But it also doesn't change that for the vast majority of people who are the same size as Antonio Brown, or from the same place as Antonio Brown, the same speed, they ain't on the football field, they're most likely in jail or dead. So to take your experiences and equate that to everybody else, and this is one thing that is constant. Those men who are separate, the Herschel Walkers, the O.J. Simpsons, the Mike Tysons, who see the world differently based on their experiences, you can't begrudge them that. But that also doesn't color anybody else's experiences. That also doesn't take away from very real things that are happening. People don't seem to get that black people are always judged by the exception and not the rule. We're judged by the people who made it out as opposed to the majority of people who will not. And then the people who are the exception tell us what the rules are. Now, I'm not begrudging your outlook, but to say that because you made $100 million, you made $100 million, and it proves to you racism doesn't exist. Colin Kaepernick lost $100 million, proving it did. And both of you are entitled to your expenses. You want to be a rapper, but let me tell you something. As soon as your usefulness wanes, it'll be a rap. The things you're doing right now and get away with because you're uber talented, see how black you are absent. Let your 40 time drop and your route running not be as crisp and your hands not be as sure. See exactly how much they tolerate. See what happens when you get older and you start to have some level of attrition. See if Tom Brady will let you stay at his house then. You believe there's no racism in football because they gave you $100 million? Invest that $100 million, make it be worth $1 billion, and then try to buy an NFL team and see what they say to you. All the money you got in the world is not going to change the way they see you. And it is not unusual for a situation where slavery very much existed to take a prize buck and exalt him to the extent that he doesn't think he's like anyone else. That's a little note from the GED section. We got the Jazz Report coming up in 15 minutes. It's the D.L. Hughley Show.